On this episode of Carpe Diem, Zoomer sex. Whoa! We're still having it.
Wow, you're going for the big questions, huh?
And it's no big secret.
5-6 times a week is good for anybody, I think.
UBC's Marina Adshade, doctors Jason Winters and Stephen Peach show us how to keep it up.
Carpe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome to Carpe Diem. Sex is an antidote to aging. It lowers the risk of prostate cancer, decreases blood pressure, helps us sleep, and improves our mood. Today, we go under the covers. Is sex important to you?
Wow, you're going for the big questions, huh?
Sex? Oh, I think it's very important.
Oh man, it's critical.
Why do you think that?
I don't know. It's because it's fun.
It probably is less important as you age than when you're younger.
It's as important as it ever has been.
Extremely so.
It's more important when you're younger than it is as you get really older.
When you're in your 20s, that's pretty much all there is.
I'd like to have it more often, and I'm getting it, so to speak.
You know, 5-6 times a week is good for anybody, I think. You know.
Sex later in life is extremely important. It makes people live longer, feel better, and is part of the essence of life itself.
I'm surprised to hear that some people said that sex was not as important as we age. Dr. Winters, why is that?
Okay, so this might seem like the wrong answer, given that I'm a sex therapist and a large part of the work that I do is helping people improve their sex lives. But I think sex for some people is like anything else. It can be important at certain stages of life, but then that may change. If you compare it to things like family, if you have a family, or career, things like that where it may have more importance during certain decades, but less importance in other decades.
Yeah. Dr. Peach, what would you like to add to that?
I think, you know, the importance of sex is probably understated in terms of, you know, not just how it's helpful for us physically. So you talked about a little bit there about how it helps to reduce blood pressure, how it's good physically, but just the emotional aspect. I think the emotional importance of it. So it's no less important at different times in our life.
Marina, your thoughts on that?
As you age, you know, you have more time, but I think then people also maybe feel differently about their bodies as they age. And so maybe there's something to that, you know, it's about how you feel about yourself physically that is changing what sex is, but doesn't mean it can't be both fun and good for you, right?
I think it's good. But you know what? Let's go back into the street because we asked, how is your sex life?
It gets better in some ways, but I'm older, and so there's issues that come with aging.
We eat well and exercise a lot, and so no differences.
I'm 69, but I haven't had any complaints.
Not as physical, I guess, depending on how physical you were when you were younger.
I think we've got it covered.
So, Dr. Peach, how does our sex drive change as we age?
Across the board, we might say that naturally as we age, because of some of the challenges that our body faces as we age, then you may say in general there's a drop in sex drive, but that's a very individual thing. I think for some people their sex drive actually increases as they age. It could be because there's more time. So because there's more time to be intimate, there's more time to spend on you know, really truly being present with your partner. And also with yourself, like giving yourself the time to explore.
I think that speaks to a really important distinction, and that's the difference between sex drive and the desire for sex, which are two different but related things. So I typically think of sex drive as that physiological drive state, much like being hungry, that state of tension in that you want to have some sort of sexual experience. But the desire for sex doesn't necessarily need to flow from that. As a matter of fact, many times it doesn't. So to get to your point, which I think is a really good point, I think changes in life related to creating opportunities or having opportunities to sexually reconnect can increase a desire for sex, regardless of whether or not that sex drive is still as strong as it once was. And I think what people often find is once they start re-engaging in sex and they're having good sex, the drive actually gets stronger. In other words, there's more physiological drive to have sex that flows from those positive experiences.
Use it or lose it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I love Ivy and Jackson in that video because they're the newlyweds and they've obviously not been having sex for decades. They are really into each other, and I think that's probably why you get a different response from them than you do get from the other people, is they're clearly excited to be with one another. They're still learning about one another. And I think that's probably what is creating the differences in perception between the people that you talk to on the street.
She was exuberant, to say the least. When we come back, we challenge outdated assumptions about sex.
Still ahead on Carpe Diem.
Sex is a mental activity that goes through your body and your heart and your soul and gives you physical and mental release.
Carpe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
We learn about sex early in life, but do we keep learning as we age? Sexual abilities and desires change just like our bodies. Dr. Peach, would you like to address some of those assumptions?
Wow, there was a lot of assumptions there, wasn't there? Well, I mean, there's some truth to it too. I mean, the physical changes are certainly there. Although we do have ways to overcome some of those physical changes as well. So first in women, for example, you know, we know now more about how to tackle some of the biological changes that occur that make it difficult or sometimes even painful for the act of sexual intercourse. And of course, we all know about some of the agents for men and how that's revolutionized things, or certainly has brought back, you know, the ability physically for men to improve their sexual experience.
Okay, there's a few things I would definitely like to add to that. I think those are some really good insights. Some other ones that tend to come up that I see regularly in my practice is people making the assumption that if their partner loves them enough, they will desire having sex with them. And that's not often the case. It's entirely possible to love your partner very much, but still not have a strong desire for sex. Another one that I often see coming up as well is my partner doesn't appear to have desire to have sex with me, and therefore my partner isn't attracted to me. And again, this is an assumption, and oftentimes it's simply not supported by what the other partner describes experiencing. There's lots of reasons not to desire sex that have nothing to do with how much somebody feels attracted to the other person.
Marina, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think that it's interesting how when we talk about older women in particular and sexuality, the idea that, like, you know, women are kind of perceived to be less sexual than men already, and that as we get older, we become, you know, completely asexual beings. And I really, if we can do anything to dispel that myth, I would really love that, because there's a lot of women who are older, you know, women who are into their 90s who still enjoy having sex.
It's more than just physical. Our minds play a big role.
I find that sexual activity adds spice. I really feel it keeps me more alive, more vital.
Well, like sex is a universal experience, and it certainly enhances our relationship.
Sex is a mental activity, and if you have a strong mental view about sex and what the outcome is, and you're looking forward to a good culmination of the sex act that goes through your body and your heart and your soul and gives you physical and mental release.
Marina, Helen said sex was a mental activity.
Yeah, I love everything about that. And I think that it really is true. And I think that the people know themselves, you know, how often when they're having sex, what's going on in their own mind and whether or not they're actually present in that moment, or are they worrying about things like, how do I look, how do I feel, how do I smell right now, am I doing this right? And I think that's very, very distracting for people, and it makes it hard for them to enjoy the experience. So this is why so much is being written at the moment about mindfulness and about just being present for sex. And I think that's really what Helen's talking about.
And you're nodding in agreement.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the flavor of sex. That's what makes sex fun, is when you're not thinking about other things, when you're fully engaged emotionally, you know, when you're fully mindful, as you say. And yes, that term gets used a lot, but I think it's really applicable here. And you saw those older couples and how they're expressing the joy of it. And you can tell that they're fully into each other, and they're not worried about those superficial things. I'm actually a little jealous. Absolutely.
Dr. Winters, what would you like to say about that video?
The other thing I noticed about that video is nobody was talking about success or failure or performance. They were talking about how much enjoyment and pleasure they were getting out of the experience. And I feel if people were able to focus on that rather than how their bodies look and how their bodies work, and whether or not they can have intercourse and reach orgasm, I think that would take a lot of pressure off people so that they'd be able to enjoy the experiences much more.
Yeah, it's true. Well, when we come back, tips, tricks, and some incredible new technologies to spice up our sex life.
Still ahead on Carpe Diem.
So what this magnet is able to do is deliver very focused electromagnetic impulses into what we call the pelvic floor musculature.
Carpe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome back. What are some of the ways to enhance our sex life? Dr. Winters?
The first is try to think of sex like you would any other enjoyable activity that you'd want to share with your partner. If you were going to go on a holiday with your partner, you'd probably talk about it, you'd explore your options, you'd talk about the places that you'd want to go, and you'd make some decisions about how you would approach going on a holiday. And then you'd probably get pretty enthusiastic and excited about it, talking about it beforehand. So if you can think about sex as if it's some other enjoyable activity and apply those same rules to it, I think you're going to see that you're going to have a lot more enjoyment, pleasure, and desire to do that.
Marina, quickly touch upon sex education for Zoomers.
I've been saying this for years. You know,
Yeah.
we have sex education when we were 15 years old. And for a lot of us, that was a long time ago, and things have changed. I actually think there needs to be better sex education for people throughout their whole lives. I think we should have it in community centers across the country, you know, getting people together and talking about, and important things like sexually transmitted infections that we almost never talk to seniors about.
Yeah, and it's prominent. Dr. Peach and I had a visit, and we went to learn about some new technology available at Aerion Skin Laser.
And what we see here in front of us is an actual BTL Emcella device. So this revolutionary chair essentially has in the bottom of the chair a large magnet. So what this magnet is able to do is deliver very focused electromagnetic impulses into what we call the pelvic floor musculature. Well, there's a very, very important application medically in terms of the treatment of incontinence. But here's the good news, or here's the fun side of it. We realized fairly quickly that women primarily were coming back saying, I'm getting more sexual pleasure, I'm getting more sensation during sexual intercourse. Julie is sitting here fully clothed. You don't have to do anything to prepare with this machine. You just have to make sure that you're sitting comfortably as she is, and the machine does all the work. How has the treatment been for you so far? How have you tolerated treatments that you've had so far?
Well, they're fairly comfortable. You feel some pulsing, and at first it feels a little bit strange, and then you get used to it. It's not uncomfortable at all. Over the last year, I've had maybe 10 treatments, and yeah, I feel the strengthening of my pelvic floor, definitely. And I have a friend with me who has never used it, and I'll be curious to see how she feels.
Whoa! Oh my goodness. Whoa, holy Toledo. Now I heard that it was also called the orgasm chair now.
Right. Yes, well, the same technology in other countries has been referred to and has been sort of marketed that way. And the people from BTL that have made the Emsella chair now have actually come back, and there's an extra setting, more with an aim towards improving sexual pleasure. So
Can I buy one for at home?
Marina, what other sex tech is out there?
Well, there's all sorts of new things that are being developed, and you know, particularly for women, the sex tech has really evolved because a lot of the stigma around female sex technology is arriving. Of course, everybody knows about sex robots because we love to talk about sex robots, but unfortunately, they're not likely to be available anytime soon. Probably it's going to be another 30 years before I have a sex robot. But there is all sorts of new technology that's coming out.
Sex tech is advancing rapidly. What about companion or sex robots? It's a controversial idea.
So we're going to stage a debate. We're going to talk about a future where there may be such thing as love robots. And for the affirmative, we have David Levy. For the negative, here we have Dr. Kathleen Richardson. If you would sit down, Kathleen.
Well, I think we live in a society where we think it's possible to live without human relationship. You actually need other human beings because without human beings, you're not confronted as a real person. And what we need to do is address that isolation politically. We need to develop a political response to it, not a technological response. The technological response will just keep reinforcing the isolation, keep creating that distance, and unfortunately keep creating that objectification.
I don't disagree with a lot of what Kathleen said, but I think there are some very important points where we differ. I didn't actually find her answer at all satisfactory. It doesn't answer the question, how can we provide satisfactory sexual relationships for people who don't have the ability themselves to find their own sexual partners. There is no political way to do that. Such people either have no sex at all, or they have to have sex with a robot or maybe with a prostitute.
I have a feeling that this subject will come increasingly to the fore because there are some serious efforts out there to create exactly this kind of creature.
Sex tech, what are your thoughts, Dr. Winters?
Well, with robots specifically, I do understand the argument. My concern would always be is turning to robots, is this a way of soothing anxiety about being with a real partner? So if you're turning to robots but would rather be with a partner, but you're feeling unsure about yourself, and this becomes your means to meet your sexual needs, but you feel like you're going without something that's more important in terms of a human relationship, then I might be a little bit concerned about it.
You know, I think there's that element of it, but then there's lots of people, for example, who might be in a relationship with another person where the other person doesn't want to do particular sex acts, or they don't want to have sex as frequently as the other person. And I can see the sex technology, like the robots, actually making it possible for people to stay together in meaningful relationships without complications that come with sexual incompatibility.
Right.
When we come back, it's time for our panel's final thoughts.
Still ahead on Carpe Diem.
You have to use it, and if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Carpe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
It's now time to go around the table for our panel's final thoughts. And Dr. Peach, why don't we start with you?
Two things I'd like to say, and the first is put a plug in for physical exercise and staying physically active and physically fit and diet. Those things are still very important to improve the experience. But the other side of it is just to encourage people to be more free with the discussion around sex. Don't be afraid to open up that discussion.
That's very good advice. Go ahead, Dr. Winters.
Okay, first of all, focus on pleasure and enjoyment. Let go of the idea of performance, let go of expectations and assumptions about how the body's going to work, and get creative. The second thing I think is really important is inevitably one person will want sex more than the other person. And what that requires is some sort of way to be able to negotiate that difference. Otherwise, there's always going to be tension around sex, and because of that, people are not going to desire having sex with their partners. And then the third and final thing I'd like to add, we know that the biggest hindrances to enjoyable sex lives are anxiety, guilt, shame, embarrassment, those sorts of emotional experiences. And if you find that you're really struggling with those type of experiences, seek some professional help.
Very important. Marina, we're going to get to your final thoughts, but first, let's watch this fun video from Jimmy Kimmel.
Seniors are having more sex than they've ever had. What's your secret?
A little vodka couldn't hurt.
What's the best way to get somebody into bed?
What's the best way? You ask too much.
You have to use it, and if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
And you're using it.
Darn right I am.
All right, Marina, your final thoughts.
So I think my final thought on this, because we haven't really talked about this, is as a single woman, don't forget that sex is important, right? Like, I think that as you get caught up in your life, and especially if you're single, because it takes a lot more work to find somebody to have sex with if you're single, I think that it's still an important thing to pursue.
Yeah. Such an interesting subject. We could go on all day. It's time for us to go, so I have to thank our panel. Thank you, Dr. Peach and Marina and Dr. Winters. And remember, as our CARPe president, Moses Neimer, always says, the best way to keep going is to keep going. So carpe diem and seize your day.